I want to welcome you all to this delightful conference we are about to have. It's our 12th conference in 4 years where we've been talking about eco-restoration and turning global warming around, which is actually only a symptom of the destruction we've done to the biosphere. And we know how to repair it. So that's the good news. Our goal is to help to find ways to regenerate this miraculous Earth and the web of life. About us humans, in our first few 100,000 years, we were hunters and gatherers, always listening to the voices of the natural world, because if we didn't, we died. There was no other way. With the onset of agriculture began the first step in 10,000 years of major planetary change. The natural world was slowly beset by human invention, and we are an animal attending to our own needs like all other animals and plants and living things. But our needs turned out to be deeply disruptive to systems on Earth. We gradually began to hear the non-human world less and less. Expanding human habitation became a barrier, both cultural and literal. Today, we globalized, civilized folk are hard put to hear other creatures speak, even when we want to. Our fellow Earthlings across the web of life are screaming at us to pay attention. Loss of habitat and biodiversity are collapses louder than nuclear explosions, yet we are deaf. Extinctions are growing at ever faster rates. As one species disappears, the implications resonate throughout this delicate yet remarkably resilient web of life. And still, what we do hear is what comes through our earbuds. The question is, can we change course? And I believe that the answer is yes. The more I do this work, the more I believe it. The natural world still speaks to us and teaches us to address the destruction we have inadvertently wrought in the course of becoming modern humans. This includes, as I've said, global warming, which is but a symptom of the greater disruption of cycles of life. Still, we have it within our reach to repair the web and regenerate healthy living systems, and the voices of nature are telling us how. Therein lies a powerful antidote to gloom and doom. We need to apply it to our worldly wounds from the incessant bad news that we hear in these very dangerous times. The wonderful news, the antidote, is buried and drowned in the din. Without attending to the wonderful news, we are bereft of a universe of possibilities, of action, and of hope. So let me offer you some wonderful news. Paul Hawken said it remarkably well in a book he published in 2008 called Blessed Unrest. To me, this is perhaps the most important book of the 21st century. And let's have a listen to Paul himself.
It is my belief that we are part of a movement that is greater and deeper and broader than we ourselves know or can know. It flies under the radar of the media by and large. It is nonviolent. It is grassroots. It has no cluster bombs, no armies, and no helicopters. It has no central ideology. A male vertebrate is not in charge. This unnamed movement, you can clap for that, the unnamed movement is the most diverse movement the world has ever seen. The very word movement, I think, is too small to describe it. No one started its worldview. No one is in charge of it. There is no orthodoxy. It is global, classless, unquenchable, and tireless. The shared understanding is arising spontaneously from different economic sectors, cultures, regions, and cohorts. It is growing and spreading worldwide, with no exception. It has many roots, but primarily the origins are indigenous culture, the environment, and social justice movements. Those three sectors and their subsectors are intertwining, morphing, enlarging. This is no longer or simply about resources or infractions or injustice. This is fundamentally a civil rights movement, a human rights movement. This is a democracy movement. It is the coming world. What you're seeing here is the beginning of a list of the 130,000 minimum organizations in the world who work towards social and environmental justice. And that's the minimum. It may be 250,000 groups. It may be 500,000 groups. Read these names. They're unfamiliar to you, most of them, I'm sure, right? They are. We do not know how big this movement is. It's marked by kinship and community and symbiosis. It is Pachamama. It's Mama, right? It's the earth talking back, waking up, you know. What you see is your kin on that screen, you know. And to give you a sense of how big this movement is, if I had started this tape on Friday morning at 9 a.m. when this conference began, and if we sat here all day Friday, all night Friday, all day Saturday, all night Saturday, all day Sunday, all night tonight, and all day Monday, we still would not have seen the names of all the groups in the world who we are. It's so new, we can't recognize it. We're familiar with armies and governments and war and churches and religions, but there's no precedent for what we're doing. What you're creating is completely unknown. It is everywhere. There is no center. There's no one spokesperson. It's in every country and city on earth. It is within every tribe, every race, every culture, and every ethnic group in the world. This is the first time on earth that a powerful, non-ideological movement has arisen. And during the span of the 20th century, big ideologies were worshipped like religion. They dominated our beliefs. This is to speed it up so you don't have to stay here until Monday night. The ideologies dominated capitalism, socialism, communism, right? In the words of Ed Hunt, ideologies stalked the earth clad in armor. Right? They fought for the control of our minds and their lands, and it wasn't pretty. And we were told that salvation would be found in the domination of a single system. This is where salvation will be found. We know that as biologists, we know that as community organizers, we know that as ecologists. It's found in diversity. This movement is humanity's immune response to resist and heal political disease, economic infection, and ecological corruption caused by ideologies. So it is up to us to decide, how will we be? Who will we be? This is what it is we're building, the capacity to respond. It is about possibilities and solutions. Humankind knows what to do.
I spend much of my time immersed in the world of blessed unrest. Every day I learn of a new person or organization doing wonderful things that I'd never heard of before. We still don't know the scope of this movement, but it's clear that this movement is growing by leaps and bounds, healing the earth, healing our relationships with each other, opening our hearts and spirits to ancient possibilities that we've all but forgotten. The answers we need don't lie with ever more corporate technology, complexity. They lie with the creatures we'll hear about today, all of which are infinitely more complex and elegant than the most complicated of human inventions. Their innate intelligence puts the artificial kind to shame. I'd like to tell you about just a tiny few of the many examples of blessed unrest I've discovered over the past couple of years. I know you'll find many more on your own. I'm sure you already have. They give me great hope in the face of climate and environmental collapse because they are so very diverse, resilient, positive, powerful, and possible. La Via Campesina. How many people have heard of it? Okay, not bad. It's called, in English, The Peasant's Way. Was founded in 1993 by farmers and organizations from Europe, Latin America, Asia, North America, Central America, and Africa. It describes itself as an international movement which coordinates peasant organizations of small and middle-scale producers, agricultural workers, rural women, and indigenous communities from Asia, Africa, America, and Europe. It is a coalition of 182 organizations in 81 countries advocating family farm-based sustainable agriculture, and was the group that coined the term food sovereignty. La Via Campesina has carried out campaigns to defend farmers' seeds, to stop violence against women, to recognize the rights of peasants, and for global agrarian reform, among others. It represents 200 million small farmers around the world who produce up to 70% of the world's food. Move over, Monsanto. Your day is gone. Last April, I was contacted by Tolka Shetikauri in Koni, in the North Caucasus, in the country of Georgia. She wanted to connect with others around the world who are working on eco-restoration. She and her family understand the seriousness of biodiversity loss and are eager to do their part in addressing it. Koni is the last village in the gorge. I guess that means before you go up the mountain. It has 5 permanent local residents. Like Cape Cod, its population swells during the summer to 10 households. The goal of the Biodiversity House, Tebulo, is to establish a scientific facility, an ecotourist camp for visitors interested in biodiversity. Samples of local flora would be collected and displayed in an herbarium, equipped with the materials and equipment necessary to pursue scientific investigation. Ecotourists and scientists would stay overnight and conduct studies and taste local cuisine. Tebulo would also provide an extra source of income for the community by providing local guides and agro products. So from 200 million to 5. The Blue Dasher Farm. That's some of the life on the Blue Dasher Farm. The farm is actually bigger than that. Blue Dasher Farm and the Ecdysis Foundation were founded by entomologist Jonathan Lundgren. Has anybody heard of Jonathan Lundgren? Okay. He's kind of a star in the regenerative ag and ranching business. He did this when his stellar career ended at the USDA as a result of his investigations into the ill effects of neonics. I met John in South Dakota last spring at a grass-fed beef convention. He ran his own lab and staff at the USDA for 11 years, wrote a well-regarded book on predator insects, published nearly 100 scientific papers, and acted as a peer reviewer for dozens of publications. For years, his body of research was either neutral or favorable to farming policy and the chemical industry. But 3 years ago, he started cautioning against the overuse of pesticides. That shift, he says, triggered his suspensions and a downturn in his professional fate. Thus, a USDA most likely to succeed rising star fell from the heavens. Discouraged but undeterred, he and his wife sold everything they had and bought Blue Dasher Farm. John learned farming from scratch. He had studied all the insects and other things, but he'd never actually tried farming, and used it as his research base, and then set up his own research lab, Ecdysis Foundation. It was created to support the reimagining of agriculture along ecological principles with independent farmer-driven research and applying cutting-edge science to address the problems faced by farmers, ranchers, and beekeepers on the leading edge of regenerative agriculture. In other words, research free of corporate and academic restrictions. John hopes to diversify the multidisciplinary scientific expertise developed at the South Dakota location and then take the Ecdysis model nationally and establish a network of facilities around the country that can address local and regional issues. And so far, he's doing very well on this. The Victory Garden Initiative. Everybody's heard of Victory Gardens. Well, this initiative builds communities that grow their own food, creating a socially just, environmentally sustainable, nutritious food system for all. Its slogan is, "This is a grassroots movement. Move grass, grow food." It's accomplished through several programs where VGI brings communities together to teach them how to grow food. It supplies them with the means to create their own sustainable community. Victory Garden Initiative believes that every person in every household can connect to the food source through the act of growing it. This act reminds us that we are of the earth, that we cannot live without the earth, that our needs are met not by the economy, but by the earth. Growing food will reintegrate us with deep ecology, guiding our culture towards sustainable, abundant future, freed from financial inequities. Victory Garden Initiative launched in Milwaukee in 2009 when a group of community members recognized the negative environmental, social, economic, and health implications of our dominant food system. VGI has rallied to install over 3,500 gardens, launch a 1.5-acre urban farm, plant 26 orchards in low-income neighborhoods, teach adults and children to grow food, and train 68 community food leaders, expanding to other communities like Green Bay, Wisconsin, and Berea, Kentucky. Through gardening, VGI seeks a connection to the cycle of life and for good, tasty food from garden to plate. The mission of the 0 Hour movement is to center the voices of diverse youth around climate and environmental justice. 0 Hour is around a year-old youth-led movement creating entry points, training, and resources for new young activists and organizers and adults who support that vision. They want to take concrete action around climate change and create a movement of unstoppable youth organizing to protect their rights and access to natural resources for a clean, safe, and healthy environment that will ensure a livable future where we all not just survive, but flourish. This past spring and summer, I had the privilege of getting to know young people at 0 Hour during their July March on Washington. The weather that day was challenging. It rained so hard, I was wetter than I had ever been, except for swimming in a lake. But their spirits were undrenched. They knew all along that this culminating event was just the beginning. In a moment, you will hear from the young woman on the far left, right next to the bee. And she's Nadia Nazar, one of the leaders, who will tell you her story and give a 0 Hour update. So to sum it up, this is but a tiny, tiny sampling of the world's blessed unrest. If you can find an iceberg somewhere, seek out its tip, cut up a clump of ice, zero in on a handful of frozen water molecules. That's how small this sample is of the blessed unrest whole. The natural world is changing very quickly. We know that. Yet the rate of climate disruption is matched by our collective inspiration rising to the occasion. We need not despair at apparent looming collapse and extinction, as dire as that threat may seem. Our existence on Earth embodies so much more of the life force than we realize. We know what is needed for Earth repair, and we know how to do it. We are now just getting started. When all is said and done, we too are a species with a voice of nature to be heard. Thank you.